Joining me now for reaction are two congressmen from the GOP, Wisconsin Congressman Sean Duffy, who's in Wausau, Wisconsin, and from the Democratic Party, California Congressman John Garamendi, who is in Sacramento. Great to see both of you on a Friday night. Let's start with you, Congressman Duffy. This NRA boycott seems to me to miss the point of the red flags missed by local authorities, federal authorities, and all the other factors that have clearly come into play. You say?
Want to protect kids, there's a whole bunch of things we should look at. First, instead of looking at the NRA, let's look at what failings happened within local law enforcement. Look at the failings of the FBI. Look at the failings of the school that failed to protect these kids from Nicholas Cruz coming in and shooting them up. But what you've seen happening across America is you have left-leaning media companies that are putting incredible pressure on companies to buy into the liberal agenda. And I think what they forget, these companies forget, is though they might be headquartered in New York or in California or in Chicago, they try to hawk their wares all across middle America, and we support the Second Amendment. And we've been a silent majority. We were silent all the way up until the Trump election, when we came out in mass force and elected a new president. And I think, though we might not sign petitions online to boycott, we might not come to rallies, you're going to see Americans who are offended by what these companies are doing stand up and go, you know what, if I have a choice to spend my dollar with a pro-Constitution company or one who stepped away from the NRA, I'm going to spend my money with companies that support my values. And I think you're going to see that affect the bottom line of companies all across America, which I think would be a good thing. Congressman
Garamendi, the New York governor, Andrew Cuomo, is trying to lure Delta to New York. Say, come to New York, we'll treat you well. But, you know, New York is a nightmare still for businesses, even though they've tried to bring more businesses back. What is your reaction to this concern about from the NRA members and just regular Americans to say, like, this is all taking it a bit too far, that the NRA is killing kids? Come on.
Well, the reality is that boycotts for political and economic reasons are as old as this nation. If you remember the first Tea Party, I mean the Boston Tea Party, that was a boycott. It goes on and on in this nation where people express their political or economic views by not involving themselves with one company or another. For these companies, I think the words of the president of Delta Airline probably is what we ought to look at, and that is that Delta, if I heard him correctly, basically he said that that company and he does not want to be involved in a political debate over issues that are not directly related to that company. Now, with regard to the Georgia legislature and I suppose the governor repealing that sales tax exemption, I've been down this road before where here in California there was a huge fight between the Bay Area airports and Los Angeles over who could have the lowest or the least or no sales tax on jet fuel so that the fuel would be so that the planes would go to that particular airport. So I think Delta will simply load its planes and the fuel someplace else where they will probably get a tax break.
I get it. But the problem here is the members of the NRA had nothing to do with the shooting. They're not responsible for this. And truth be told, I think they only had like 13 people get this Delta, break on their airfare to the NRA conference. So it's not that many people, but it's a message, and it's the same message that middle America has gotten from the elites for years. That you're stupid, you're knuckle draggers, you're obsessed with guns, you're a bunch of Bible-thumping idiots. That's how they feel. Congressman Duffy, I know you and I have discussed this before, and then Congressman Garamendi, you'll get back.
I represent a very, very large agricultural district, and I will tell you that there is nobody that I'm aware of in the California Democratic delegation that would even begin to describe my area and the people that I represent in the way you just did. They're hardworking. They have their views. Some are conservative, some are liberal, but all of them really believe that this is America, and they have an opportunity to speak out.
So Congressman, and I want Sean Duffy to get on this. If we're going to judge people based on and organizations, blood spilled, well, I hope Planned Parenthood is going to lose all of its partnerships or affiliations given the fact that we have about 57 million babies who never got to see the light of day. There's a lot of medical waste that includes blood all over this country. And so to vilify the NRA when we have 325,000 babies murdered in an abortion clinic, Planned Parenthood, every year, give me a break. Go ahead, Sean.
Laura, so you hear the left-wing media talk about saving kids' lives. You hear these kids talking about saving kids' lives. If you want to save kids' lives, I'd look to the Democrat Party and to Planned Parenthood and the left-wing media. And Planned Parenthood killed 300 of the most defenseless, voiceless little babies last year alone. If you want to save lives, take money away from Planned Parenthood and start attacking Planned Parenthood for destroying the most, 300,000, right, the most defenseless and voiceless among us. And then you want to say you want to go after guns, which is a constitutional right? This is the greatest hypocrisy that's ever existed on the face of the earth. They're not trying to save lives. They're trying. Do you want to know what this is really about, Laura? Liberals want us to rely on government, whether it's our housing, our health care, our protection with the Second Amendment. They want all reliance on government. And this is just one other step in a long line of things that take away individual rights and point us to the government to be responsible for everything. So we live in a great big nanny state from cradle to grave. They care for everything that we'll ever need in our lives. And we believe as Republicans in individual responsibility and liberty.
Sean,
we should be able to take care of ourselves. I want to defend my
Go
family
ahead.
in my home with my guns if someone comes calling. I don't want to have to rely on law enforcement. And liberals say, no, government should provide everything
We'll take care of you.
Well,
Congressman Garamendi, go ahead.
That's right.
Well, I'm just saying those are really good talking points. But what we're talking about here is really the safety in our communities. And there is an appropriate and a very good debate going on in America about what role guns have in our society and how we could best protect ourselves
John, if you care about people, if you care about little kids,
but Sean,
are you going to stand with me and take away money from Planned Parenthood? Do you care about children?
Sean,
if you care about kids, how can you support Planned Parenthood?
Sean,
and your party support Planned Parenthood. You can't have it both ways. You can't
Sean,
say,
you're not
I
going to
want to
win
take
this
guns
debate
away,
by,
a constitutional right from law-abiding citizens, and
Okay,
I still want to
Sean,
support the killing and death of the most defenseless babies and children in our society.
Laura,
I mean, you can't have it both ways. So stand with me.
Move from the NRA to Planned Parenthood in some segue that I missed. Let's get back to the issue at hand.
Look, Congressman, you have plenty of time to talk. But let me tell you why we said, I mean, I thought it was pretty clear, but I'll explain it again if you're confused. We're talking about the blood of children, innocent children who are gunned down in that school. And we're talking about the blood of the most innocent who are defenseless in the womb. The elderly and in the womb are the most, and the disabled are the most defenseless in this country. And there's a whole industry that gets millions of dollars from the federal government who has bought and paid for by the cult of death. That's why he brought it up. But go ahead.
Well, Laura, if you could just slow down for a few moments. Planned Parenthood gets no money from the federal government.
$500 million.
Let's move beyond. I thought we were going to spend our time talking about a very real problem here in the United States. If you want to talk about the abortion issue, then we can do that also. But we started this conversation talking about
why you don't want to talk about it, but go ahead.
Laura, please don't put words in my mouth. And don't
I didn't.
Make
I said it makes you feel uncomfortable. That's an opinion. Go ahead.
The reality is we have before us in Washington a very important issue, and that is how are we going to deal with the gun violence in our nation, whether that is whether by suicide in individual homes or whether it is by assault weapons, as we saw at the schools. This is an important debate, and we ought not move away from that debate onto other issues which are important also. So let us go back to this issue. How are we going to deal with this?
Right.
And
well, so we brought up a couple of things. Okay. A lot of people want to take away gun rights, or they want to diminish gun. I get that. That's an old debate. But we had the FBI and local authorities and the school itself refusing to act on the obvious for a lot of different reasons. And maybe it was malfeasance and something. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was an oversight. But those three factors alone combined together to allow this kid to go out and get these weapons. It wasn't the NRA who missed the red flags. And the FBI were told the kid's going to shoot up a school, and they don't stop him, and then suddenly it's the NRA's problem? You got to be kidding me. That's a lame argument. Congressman Duffy.
Well, let's...
John, we've had guns in our society since our founding, and kids weren't picking up guns and shooting other kids in school. What's happened in the last 20, 30, 40 years that's caused this phenomenon to take place? If you want to address this problem, you have to look at what's happening in culture. Fatherless homes, violence that comes from Hollywood in regard to movies and video games, We have a slew of issues that have taken place that have undermined our families and our values. There's no faith and morality in our community, in our schools, in our families any longer. You could look at a whole subset of issues that are addressing the anger that kids have right now that cause them to pick up guns. I talked last night on Tucker about cell phones, Sean, and a detachment that we have from
Sean,
from culture and society.
There are, Sean, if I might.
So if you want to
go to Congressman
you should talk about those issues. And if you just go right to the this is a political issue that you've been driven for 20 years that'll come up with each new shooting. The bottom line is we have a crisis in America, and it's not guns, it's our culture and the way we're raising our kids.
All right, Congressman Garamendi.
Sean, you've raised a very valid point. And one of the things that we need to do is to use tools that are readily available and have been available for us for some time to be used in schools to deal with those precise issues that you raised. That is the acting out, the loneliness that some people have, and the isolation and bullying that does take place. Coming out of Columbine as well as Sandy Hook are two very successful programs that are available in schools. It is interesting to note that in the president's budget, he removed some $50 million that was precisely for the purpose of safe schools. That is to make these programs available to deal with those cultural problems that you just described. So we ought to get about doing that.
I want to agree.
Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, Sean, quickly. We're way over this segment, but go ahead. Sean,
I know you put in $63 billion in this last budget. Let's take some of that $63 billion. We both can agree that we need school security, and you might have different security for different communities. My community might say, I want to arm law-abiding teachers who have specific training. Other communities might do something else, but we can agree, shore up our schools. Let's focus on the things we can agree on.
Let's end on a good note. That's a good note to end.
Good idea. Let's do that.
Good.
Guns we won't agree on. Shoring up schools.
All right, guys.